introduction about our session. Who will be our speakers? Sonia Brewin. She will be talking about her experience of working with communities in the Middle East. Maiya Sagym is our dear friend from Kazakhstan, and she will be speaking about very interesting initiative of Taldikol, of Artcom Platform, and Christian Potiron, who is very active in Slovakia, and the session will be moderated by Michal Klembara, my colleague from Slovakia, from Tech Network Cultural Centers, representing Cultural Center Malý Berlín. I'm happy to give the floor to Michal and to the wonderful speakers. Thank you very much.
Welcome to all of you to the fourth session of Cultural Accelerator. We will discuss the topic of community empowerment today. My name is Michal Klembara and I will moderate this panel discussion. Our guests are Sonia Brewin, Maiya Sagym, and Christian Potiron. Each of them has a short presentation already, and I will ask Sonia to be the first one to present their work.
Hi, so I'm Sonia, and I'm really delighted to be, at least virtually, participating in Azerbaijan's cultural dialogue, and seems like it's an incredibly exciting time to be part of this conference, given how much has changed in the last year in arts and culture. I'm a Londoner. When I was 18, I started working in the community. Just move us out of the way. And I started working in the community, and I worked with the over 60s, the homeless. I then increasingly worked with people that are typically considered as disenfranchised or marginalized in the community. And I started working with, eventually I moved to the Middle East, and I became involved in the largest art fair in the region, which is Art Dubai. And I headed up what was essentially the kind of the outreach of artists going into the region, which typically meant that we identified the user group, the community that we wished to work with, and this tended to be people in refugee camps. We've created architectural tours, community museums, drawathons, hands-on sustained projects, large-scale painting, overseas trips, publication seminars. So a long list of activities which were generally reactive to the situation that we found ourselves in. One of the things that springs to mind, though, when I started to think about this talk is when we use the word community and audience and even empowerment, which I find all of these terms quite loaded personally, are we having a chance to reflect on them as the people who tend to create these projects? And often I find myself now, having been doing this for 30 to 20 years, that the funding or the funders, the big donors, tend to be the audience that we are working most hard to please. This may be different for the other speakers, but without funding, most of the projects that I did would not have been sustainable and also would not have got off the ground. This is not to say that communities do not self-generate art projects. It's just that in the region in which I was typically working, or in the communities which, you know, are economically disenfranchised, which is why art is being taken to them, there wasn't the funding to sustain such projects or even to initiate them. So one of the areas that I would, because we're going to keep our presentation short, but one of the things that I was reflecting on was, if I'd had a toolkit when I was 18, when I started, what would be in that toolkit? And perhaps that's something that, as Azerbaijan moves forward, working with its own communities, some of these words will resonate. And some of these audience segments will resonate as well. So in the toolkit, I would obviously put relevance. Is what you're doing relevant? Is the attitude of all participants coherent and cohesive? Do you have the right resources? So resources, I would put facilitators, institutions, big donors. Is everyone who's participating able to bring the skills that they have access to, or are they withholding some of those skills? Do you trust everybody that you're collaborating with? Do you share the same values? And what is the vision of the project? Sometimes, as I said, the projects that we created were reactionary, and the vision was different for each stakeholder. And it often comes down, for me, to the gatekeepers that we were able to connect with. So the gatekeepers in refugee camps, or in terms of working with Emiratis and people in the Emirates, who actually allows you access to the community that you may be identifying as in need of your project, or benefiting best from your project. They may not even know that they have that need until you, as the creator, come and say, this is something that the arts could solve or facilitate or broker. I think that to empower is an incredibly exciting word that is often overused in the arts. And I would throw into the debate today whether art really empowers people, or whether it's something that we are now using or overusing. I certainly think I have gained a lot of joy from being in the arts, and I know that the people who have participated in my projects have as well. But I tend to think that I enabled. I'm not sure that I necessarily empowered. That's it.
Maiya, can you continue with your presentation?
Mm-hmm. Hello, everyone. My name is Maiya. I'm from Kazakhstan, Astana, and I am representing Artcom Platform, a community-based art platform. And I was actually the part of that community, and now I am working on that platform. And I would like to start my talk about talking about ecosystems, which we care a lot about, and I believe that that's what makes us sustainable. The ecosystems which we are part of and involved in, and here the illustration of our Artcom Platform ecosystem with all the communities, projects, organizations, and partners. And that sense of understanding of connectedness is important for us, and lies in the concept of our platform. And that actually how we came into our other initiatives, like mentioned before. Social Decor is an initiative we work on to save the lakes, small tel decor in our city from construction and draining works. Because we care about ecosystems we are involved in, and actually we came to that project from working with the neighbors community, from the project Kurşiler of artist Girima Span. And when we worked with those neighbors communities, we actually get introduced with the lakes that was near that area where those residential buildings located. And we always try to find out when we work with community something that is important and valuable for that specific group of people connected, like in one place, like neighbors, and that actually how it's started, and then it like continued in our initiative Social Decor. And also I want to talk about that our community is a complex net of relationships and social connections which are built by all those people involved, and we emerged with the help of the local artist community, who are the base and the core of our community, that consists of leaders, people who identify themselves as a part of our community and are keen to act together. We rely on resources that we have in our communities, on the experience and skills of the people involved, and we try to build those leaders and experts within ourselves. And the important to make that commitment to do and build something together, it comes from common values and from the experience we gain together. And always when we make our projects, we start from discussions what important for us, and we always keep our doors open to everyone to join, and the whole process of making projects is actually very it's participatory. Like we involve everyone in the whole process from ideation and creation, and then practices of doing something together, and when we share this sense of connectivity, by that we share that sense of connectivity and belonging.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And now I will ask Christian to continue with his presentation.
Hello, everybody. So my name is Christian Potiron. I'm French, but living now for 20 years in Slovakia and in Central Europe. I will shortly, in the introduction, present a project or a program we developed within Košice 2013, which was European Capital of Culture in 2013. I've been studying city development, so I'm also much focusing on participation, social work, and urban development, and then cultural management. So I'm always looking for that interaction between and the arts, the social work, and the city development, and all that meets very often in those projects of European Capitals of Culture. Shortly, to introduce, Košice is a city of about 250,000 inhabitants in eastern Slovakia, not far from Ukrainian border, and it's the second city in Slovakia next to the border of Schengen area, and also a post-Hungarian, post-communist, and post-industrial city, which offer a lot of opportunity for transformation and multicultural dialogue. I'll pass through that shortly. The project I'll present today is called SPOTS. It was one of the main programs of this European Capital of Culture, and it's focusing on that type of landscape you probably most of you know, where the main aims were involving within building a European Capital of Culture, so an artistic and cultural program, for a year. We were very much focusing on this community development, community art as a specific type of art form, but also, of course, all the revitalization of suburbs and non-formal education. And maybe the basic things we used is actually this maybe not very sexy image of heat exchanger, which is kind of this technological building in between the block of flats where you transport the heat to the houses. Maybe some of you know that from their own living surrounding. The very interesting part of that type of buildings is that this old technology is now changed by new technology, which demand less space. It was in the ownership of the city, and it's a very convenient location, really in between the block of flats, as closest as possible to where the people are massively living. And we were transforming about 8 of them as a network all around the city, as a way to work on the centralization of culture and offering this place for interaction with the citizens directly where they live. The interesting things with those buildings is that they were working and are still working a bit as empty boxes, which are filled by the inhabitants. So meaning there is a community, a cultural mediator working and helping the community to develop its own program. But in the reality, the local inhabitants have their own keys and develop their own program in those spaces. Shortly about what can be a type of process, and I can imagine if several of you are running cultural or places or cultural institution, it's also this to get out of that classical cultural territories and going to meet the people where they live. Actually, we were working a lot on the mapping and the need analysis at the beginning with several community events, build a feeling of belonging between the citizens, micro-granting, education, activities in the public space, but really building that feeling that is partly also their buildings. Some are looking like that, a bit maybe more attractive form with the climbing wall on the facades or cinema on the roof with a community garden, or some are more focusing on specific topic like this one on urban sports with a ball and a skate park in front of it. The program that we were developing was actually dealing with 4 main lines, just for you to understand, or you can pact or develop a project with activities which were more focusing on community development, so planning with the people about what are their needs and where they want or how they want to transform their community. So again, this empowerment activity. So we're about developing creative skills in the community with possibilities for artists to get in residence in that neighborhood, art education, art in public space, and different type of community art productions. Somewhere dealing more with the physical place, so developing the suburbs with the heritage walk, work on the facades with the murals and other activity of that type. And the last one was more dealing with the dialogue between the communities, between the majority and the minorities, with question of migrations and art and social work in general. Some of the highlights, so we were also finding artworks that were reflecting the identity, but we're also attracting the public awareness, like for instance with this traditional Slovak architecture, wooden architecture on the roof of a block of flats. And just to end and open maybe the talk on more maybe theoretical or conceptual aspect of all that, the method we were using is community art and is dealing about art reaction to the society needs and using the cultural potential and the identity for developing project as a working material for artists, and having the citizens also asking the artists to work on their topics on. So it's not just a shape on or reshaping where the things are happening, but also the content of the artworks and who decide which content is reflected in the art. So looking for the synergy between the professional artist and the citizens and the citizen activity, and creating new relation, new reality, new images from those suburbs. Maybe from our Dutch partner called XL, I have like 2 schemes just for reflection that we probably will reflect also later. But for us, that was the basic process of what is community art, starting with the civic demand that we should be reflecting, working with artists on an artistic answer that can inspire, that can reflect, then involving the 2 of them in a collaboration force for this co-creation. And at the end, you create new values, relation, images that are shaping force for the community where you start working. And this is a never-ending, of course, a process. Another tool we were using very often, but I won't go in details with that, just telling that the projects are really of this very 4 type, those that are shaping the public perception. So like what you saw on the roof, changing the image of identity of neighborhood. Some that are working directly with the physical space of the neighborhood where you work. Some that are working more on the personal skills, personal development, talent development of the inhabitants. And the last one, which is maybe more working on social cohesion, or the community, the neighbors are working together and building, binding between them, building a story they share and a vision they want to achieve.
Okay, I will start with quite a basic question for all of you, but answers can be really different. And my question is, what does community development or community work in the field of arts and culture mean for you? All of you used really different topics or methods on your work until these days. And I'm interested to hear more about your perception of this topic and how we can approach this in a very practical way. Who wants to be first?
Okay, I can go first. I think I used to truly believe that the community was something that art or me being in there, because I am a trained artist, so probably I should say that's my practice. For me, community meant people that would be not saved necessarily, but that there would be some kind of redemption from creating art collectively. And I think what I really start to realize now, and it's sort of what the steer of my presentation is, it's much more top down than bottom up, because sadly I'm now becoming a bit more of a cynic, and I feel that community is those that pay for the rest of the art world to function. So I actually would say, if I'm creating a community project now, I'm afraid to say I would not begin grassroots. I would go find the cash. So this is what community, I'm afraid to say, would now mean to me, because I think there's a domination of those that have over those that have not. Contentious, I know.
I would personally come back to what the definition of a community is, which and it works in the frame of if you are an art center or a community or a cultural center, like, is the community your audience, or is the community the neighbors, or is the community special groups with special needs you would like to tackle in your work? Probably there is a beginning of like, you know, the roots of the question you put, and I used to say the community today with the online world did change, and is changing very quickly. I believe with Sonia or Maiya, we have sometimes more together than might be with my neighbor, even if we are from different states, because we share a practice, we are from the cultural, and so there are communities that are not those physical. I know from the Slovak context that unfortunately still, when you speak about communities in Central Europe, for part of the workers and professionals, it still refers to social sphere with the communities with special needs. You know, in my practice, of course, communities is is more about a neighborhood. So sometimes I'm mixing or exchanging one word with the other, but the neighborhood which is in the process of establishing also its own identity, defining its own needs, which should work as a group. And I would not, I mean, speaking about community development and then community planning within that, within art sphere is a little bit tricky also, because it's, is that the role of art to be at the center of community planning and community development? But if it's not, at least art and culture can bring something to that process, because its role is to shape also the identity, shape the values, open debates, provoke debates, show what the boundary or the problems in the society where we live. So in the project or works I'm doing, like community art, which is a specific form of art, is involved in this community planning and community development, but it's not one and the other, it's not exactly the same. Like, art center can do, or cultural center can join the force and get involved in community development, but doesn't have to be its main aim as an organization. So I'm coming a difference of Sonia more from this also para-public NGO or public organization. So there are funds from the state to do those type of activities. Very often the question is then which recognition would you get for that type of community artworks, which are sometimes problematically recognized in the art world as well. So this debate is always up to level.
Christian, I have another question for you, because you mentioned this role or view of cultural organization in this process. And from your experiences, maybe mostly from Košice, what can this community development or community work in culture brings to cultural organizations itself? What can it mean for people like us?
Probably it's bringing to another topic we I think agree, which is in the heart of that debate, and that's the question of the audience development for cultural organizations. And there is this long debate, or to have a larger audience, or to involve. I think for me, the most important is should be in the definition of the role of the mission, in the definition of the missions of a cultural center. And according to all those missions are defined, sometimes it might be the sense to work in the communities and overpassing the limits of the art world and saying, okay, it's not just about exhibition or having a nice theater and programming, but it can be also about reflecting and helping neighborhood communities with who we work to get more free, more enlightened, more powerful in their decision processes. So again, it's really much about how each cultural center is defining itself, and it should be referring to those missions. But of course, it sounds nowadays as a very usual tool for audience development. But again, I always say take care a bit. What do you exactly mean with that? Because of course, if it's audience development, then it's not about empowerment, and it's not always about community development. It's just about, how to say, getting more audience or diverse type of audience. And so until, if we say it's part of this main mission, and then it's fine. If it's just a tool to get new audience and more audience, it become a little bit tricky, because I used to say being involved in community artwork is also bringing some responsibilities. You work with the, it's not just the white box or the black box as a laboratory where you can try, test, and do whatever you want. You are also working with the live context with people in their communities. So you can provoke as well, but of course it's a different type of relationship. So again, if it's a mixing, if there are more and more cultural centers that are transforming and blur the borders between the social, the community, and the culture and art are blurring, but still the state institutions are not always wishing to blur. They prefer keep the barriers clear.
Okay, thank you for now, and we will try to come back to this original question with Maiya, if she's online. Yeah, she's wonderful. Maiya, what community work means for you in your field of work?
Community work for me, from my experience, mostly working grassroots, for me, community is a power of uniting and doing something together and bringing actual change. For example, in our country, we don't have those institutions that actually that help artists and contemporary artists, and by uniting together, we help each other, and we try to solve some bring some into the discussions some of the problems and the issues we have in our society, and also it is important for us to work with other communities in our cities, like neighbors communities, and that for us it's a tool to create better places to live, to make it more comfortable, and to make social connections stronger.
Sonia, we have some questions from audience about this community art. How should it work? How we can work as an artist with the people in neighborhoods or in our cities? It brings us to one question we already discussed in our preparation call as something important, and that is a role of the artist in the process. Usually it can be seems like there are cultural organizations on one side, and the other side there are communities, and artists are between them. So it seems very logically that the artists and this artistic work with the common people is a really crucial point in this process. What you can tell us from your experiences?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. So there are artists like Jeremy Deller and Tanya Bruguera who are big hitting blue chip artists, and they are global household names. So Jeremy Deller, for example, in 2001, which is actually when I started in art college, he did a project called The Battle of Orgreave, where he reenacted a riot that had taken place in the UK between citizens of a particular area where they were all losing their jobs and the police. And he collaborated with a film, he's an artist, so he collaborated with a film director, he had institutional funding and so on. And then it was shown in biennales, in galleries. And he's gone on to do projects which are also collecting items from communities and showing them again in institutional spaces like the Barbican. I think he's also shown pieces in the Tate and so on. So, and Tanya Bruguera works in a similar way. She's taken money from Creative Time, which is one of the large US institutions that fund community-related arts projects. And she has created projects that sort of look sometimes like community centers, and sometimes they look like an artist inside the community doing whatever art is. So I would say in answer to the question, there are these artists. So these are artists who are operating within the marketplace of the art world. And then there are artists, let's say, who are perhaps not operating within the marketplace. So they're not necessarily having gallery representation and working in this way and selling what they make with the community, whether it's through video rights and so on. They're literally working perhaps more in the way that Christian's working with artists. They are on the ground, they're typically members of the community, and they feel compelled, in my experience, to get out there. So when I went to Lebanon for the first time, one of the things I had to do was, I don't speak Arabic, I knew that I had to reach the community, and somebody in the community had to identify who that was going to be. I had funding from the Emirates, and I had to take that funding and make art projects. And I literally went to a couple of cultural organizations, probably similar to the one that you run, and I sat with people who I would call gatekeepers, and I said, okay, can you please reach out to your artists? There's money to do projects with people in the community, whoever the community is, and the projects can be anything that the artists want them to be, and likewise vice versa with the community. So if you are an artist and you're sitting in Azerbaijan now and you think that you're compelled to work in this way, I would find state funding. I would team up with organizations like Michal's, which are already, or ASLI is already working in this way, I believe. And alternatively, you could go to a commercial gallery and you could propose a project to a commercial gallery. And this is something that I think a lot of artists don't realize is possible. So this would be, there are different ways in answer to your question, how do artists operate in that ecosystem? I would say there's a number of ways.
Particularly, I mean, the point of entering a community is I think the key. How do you enter a community, and how do you start working with a community, and who is requesting your intervention in the community, which is the most sensitive things. Of course, you have a certain legitimacy when your organization work in the neighborhood or is tackling special groups on long run. So, but yeah, for an artist to just come to a community which is not asking anything and start working there is always a bit tricky. But sometimes, I mean, it might be also an interesting way. But I used to say, starting with the mapping the needs and seeing with the neighbors what are the burning issues. Of course, then there is the big question of how you finance all that. So of course, in a country with public funding for art and for community art, it's much easier than when you work in a country where those funds are not available. But yeah, I think we were talking also a lot about also accepting that as an artist, you are not the only person signing the work, because this is not anymore a type of artwork you put in your book as my production. And no, it's a collective work. So it means also reflecting a bit your function as an artist in that type of work, as a facilitator, as a guide, as, of course, you bring your own imaginary and your own artistic skills, but you are still working with people that give something of their self. And I used to force myself always to reflect who is gaining from the work. I, as a culture manager, the artist, or also the community is really gaining something from the work. Because a lot of work, because of the trends of working in communities, a lot of works also became, you know, you can make images from communities and gain from that your own personal visibility. And but is that really about supporting the development of the community, or is it just about your self-presentation as an artist, or as a way to get money for your salary as a manager? So always keeping in mind that, and how much you give back to the community that is involved in the process is, I think, a key element of that reflection. And yeah, and as I said, the artworks are definitely hard to define at the beginning and are not signed purely only by the artist, but also by the community of people that are joining the creation, which not all the artists wish. So it's also a personal decision, I would say.
Maiya, if I understand correctly, you are more working with grassroots activities in your own community. What do you think is the most important things with this side of this community work, if you are working within the community?
Like, what is the most important if we work within the community?
Yeah. It's not a, you know, like Sonia is coming from different country to some new community to work with the people, but you are working in your own country, in your city. It's really different point of view.
Yes, because it's like we are from the inside, and we can talk and from this point, and actually when we like start the discussion or ask questions, we start from something that is important for us, and like check if it's also like as well important for the ones who are in our community, and for example and that's actually how we like start our work and identify what is important, and with all, and actually artists work with those values and or maybe those problems and issues that we like struggling with or tackling into. And for example, like also like we had experience of working, for example, when we work with a neighbors community, it's also we like came from other neighborhood and work with like those people, but we start the work from the question like if the people need it, like for example we could make a poster like so that these neighbors could, if they are interested, they could call us and start this process. And as it mentioned before, the mapping is very useful. Like we always use those like tools, like questionnaires, and the sessions when we talk with people and try to like ask the simple questions like what is important, what they like, what they don't like, and also like what they see, like how they see the future, what they want.
And I will try now maybe more philosophical questions for all of you. But from your practice and expertise in this field, what do you think will be the future of cultural practice in this field of community development? What will be really important in next years? What do you think?
Hard question. We need first to recovery from COVID and to be allowed to be again in the community. I'm preparing the bid of the city of Žilina, can't be there, so it's very hard to work with the communities when you cannot meet actually with the people from the community. So I think we are laughing sometimes that maybe the new disco period is coming. we will be lacking so much art and culture, or we are lacking so much this art and culture, that maybe new golden age of this crazily free need for creation, for creative contact is coming. But outside that, of course, also this digital world is putting really much this question of how do we create a community and how we relate to each other in this online world, and the impact it has at the community level is growing so quickly that we cannot ignore it, that we like it or not. It's part of our everyday life. The question will be again, it's creating new borders. So the question, to be inclusive when you work in a community while you are doing part of your job online, it's a bit tricky, I would say. But outside that, it's very hard to define what is the future. I think part of that is also will be influenced by the change in the art world as well, and changes in the community world. So it's really coming from the both sides. But I'm laughing also when I see now musical festival happening 100% online. I mean, I was wondering, like all those civil tech movement where actually you can represent your neighborhood on the online platform and create a new base for exchange, for self-presentation, for new type of interaction can also happen in the online world. But I mean, the art experience is it's so much about this physical between people meeting that I can hardly imagine that will go online on all the future. But yeah, outside that, the need of a community are the same, and they will probably not change so quickly.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a couple of the questions that came in that complement your question, Michal. So somebody, Elena, has said, is it possible to be in a community online? When we started, 423 people were participating. We've now dropped down to 390, so probably they had other things to do. So in answer to Elena's question then, yes, I guess momentary communities will spring up online. Whether they're sustainable is yet to be seen. There's another question that came in from Anar Shukurov, asking very much about Azerbaijan and cultural heritage. So again, I mean, if we're right now, as we're talking about, if you are on lockdown, or we don't know what's happening with COVID, so I think online communities will play a role in the future. I think it's something that's underexplored. Of course, we have then other issues. Can these communities that we're typically talking about, who are bottom up and not top down, do they have access to all the equipment that they need and so on? And often in the communities, which I think each of us have worked in, they don't have that stuff. A lot of these people don't even have smartphones. They may even be from educational groups that have limited they've had limited access to education, and therefore even using all sorts of things like apps and so on could create complexities. So I think online is definitely a yes. It's where we're all going to have to go anyway. It's where we can congregate safely right now, like we're doing at the moment. We don't know what kinds of actual art it might develop. There will definitely be people doing physical art making offline and showing it online, and maybe there will be new art forms. As we know, virtual reality and other forms of art are rapidly developing. But again, for me, this comes down to who's going to pay for all of that. But yes, if you ask me where we might be this time next year, I suspect we'll still be having online conferences rather than physical ones, and I think there will be more creative participation. Someone was asking about music, and the music scene got online already well in advance of the visual art scene, and theatre is now having to rapidly catch up with that. We're seeing a lot of ballet going online and so on. So I think each art form will find its own digital way to exist, because otherwise we might just be annihilated as the creative sector. So.
I guess it always be important for people to engage in some process of creation, and that actually has and that sense that it gives connectivity, and that's something that is important now, and I guess it would be then. And I think that there would be still artists that would work with communities and would involve people in their artworks. I think it depends on the. Sometimes it depends on the personality of the people. Like some of the artists may be more likely to work with social issues, and I guess when you work in that, you would somehow like come to creating participatory projects and involve people in your work.
I will maybe come back to beginning of our discussion. The title of today's session is Community Empowerment. And as Sonia mentioned in her presentation, I think this community development or community work is not always about empowerment in the end. but from your perspective, all of you, in which ways we can really bring empowerment to our communities? What that can be, in which sense?
How can we bring empowerment to our communities? Yeah, so for me, that's still a complex question, because we didn't unravel communities. I can see here in the questions, people are asking quite rightly about Azerbaijan and heritage practices. So if you are in Azerbaijan and you believe in this word empowerment, then I think you have to unravel what that means in your context. You know, in each of the places where I've worked, I was in a contextual practice. So if I worked with the homeless, they didn't need empowering to not be homeless. They just wanted to find a way to reintegrate into society in very basic ways. My version of empowerment will be different. So I think this is for each of us, we have to go back to, who we are in this context, and also to acknowledge, I would say, everybody on this call today, we're incredibly privileged. We have the luxury of time to debate this, to reflect on it. And I would say in this context, this is something that we always carry with us. So yeah, I'm not sure that I still would say, despite reflecting a lot on the word empowerment, I'm not sure that that's something art can really lay claim to. I think perhaps only politicians should talk about such things. But I certainly think that as someone who works in the arts and who has loved it all my life, it has been a big enabler for me and for the people that I've worked with. It is somehow a way of enabling dialogues like what we're doing now, and also enabling people to change sometimes the circumstances that they find themselves in.
Thank you.
Maybe I would say it's also giving the members of the community the tools to create the contents, and not just create the contents with them or for them. So I used to speak also about this public curation, or like it's about, as Maiya said, like which topic do we reflect? Just asking is already a first step, but then it's also about accessibility to funding to develop their own project. It's about education, building the capacities in the community that they can develop their own projects and ask the artists for help where they need help. And I like all the practices from the public curation process, like where actually you also ask the people to tell their story, and you just help them, give them the tools of the art to tell their story, and the professional artist is helping in telling the story, but not telling the story instead of them, actually. So I was working a lot in Košice and wish to do in the future also with the documentary theater, which also, like, instead of taking reference from classical theatrical text, or which reflect a certain mindset or national wide topic, or then you can reflect also local topic that have can bring something more. Like I was in Košice, one of the projects I really loved was reflecting what was the old story of the metal industry, the siderurgy in the city, and how it creates the identity of some of the neighbors. So it was also collecting their story, helping them to bring the story together, and then was telling a story from them, with them. We were doing a lot. The last slide I was showing in my presentation, this compass of community art, was also something we were doing trainings about to help the citizens in those heat exchangers to decide which type of project they want for their community, and which type of artists they can ask, what artists can do and cannot do. And as Sonia said, of course, artists can't do everything and are not in charge of the democracy as such as a whole. But of course, they are one element of that empowerment and democracy process. So shortly for me in this, but and also was the question with heritage. Again, which heritage is that? like the concept of community museums, where actually we were doing a project in Pilsen in Czech Republic with the family photo albums, where people from the different families were collecting, giving together the family photos, which are not professional photos, but through which you can see what is the joint identity and what are the strong stories, and or did they experience from their personal level the big story of the state of Europe, but seen from the personal perspective. So I mean, it's very often also heritage has a state storytelling strategy. When it's become a community storytelling strategy, where the community is digging his own stories in his own past, it become a tool for empowerment, definitely. So yeah. I think there is not one unique answer to what you were asking. Battery of tools and elements that need to work together.
The point that this topic is really, really broad, and we can really talk about a lot of topics, but Maiya, what you can add to this?
Like about community empowerment, I guess it's like to identify the strengths and needs of the community, and actually act on that, and as it said, to share the tools and provide the funding.
There are a lot of questions that are asked about how to work with post-war community and how to work on restoring cultural heritage and architectural and historical monuments in those territories. And most of those questions are linked to recent painful history of the region. And we've been living in 3 decades in a war condition with our neighbor. And today we are facing completely new situation where more than 1 million people have to come back to the territories and bring in life and culture and revive a lot of things, economy and cultural activities. And obviously it's very difficult to face that, and it's also probably a lot of questions that are asked is probably questions that are raised to cultural workers from Azerbaijan who are working in and facing these conditions daily. And obviously this is a part of our life, and we consider this as one of our missions. But also there are certain ways of understanding how this is possible, because for now those territories are not accessible to regular people. It's still very dangerous to visit them. We have like the biggest problem is the mines, like and the fact that it's a big threat to both the servicemen and the civil community. We have a lot of deaths by accident of those who wanted to go there to see their ancestors' land, and unfortunately these stories ended up very sad. People get not only injured but also died. So, and obviously all your questions would be better asked to the Ministry of Culture, because this is the organization that takes care of the cultural revival of those territories, and to my knowledge they have a plan of doing so. We are not aware much about those developments, and maybe in the following weeks when we have the representatives from the Ministry of Culture, please ask those questions to them directly, because none of our speakers, neither I as a representative of independent cultural initiative Tardino 6 is able to answer those questions in full detail. And we also understand that our possibilities are very limited. Obviously, when it will be possible to travel and to work there, I do believe that we and other representatives of the culture will be willing to do some cultural events there, festivals, exhibitions, and so on.